With SoFi Active Invest, you can get in on IPOs prior to them being traded on the stock exchange. Access alternative investment funds that include venture capital, real estate, and commodities, and trade stocks, ETFs, and options, all on an intuitive platform that's easy to use. Plus, you'll even get a chance at up to $1,000 in stock when you fund a new Active Invest account with at least $50. Brokers and active investing products offered through SoFi Securities LLC, member FINRA, SIPC. For a full listing of fees associated with SoFi Invest, please view our fee schedule. Investments are not FDIC insured, are not bank guaranteed, may lose value. Probability of a member receiving $1,000 is a probability of 0.028%. For more information, including funds, investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses, please head over to sofi.com/invest. Before we begin, please note that this conversation may include forward-looking statements. These statements are subject to risks and uncertainties, which are described in the company's SEC filings and investor relations materials. The views expressed in this discussion are solely those of the guest and do not necessarily represent the views of the host or the show. This discussion is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as investment, legal, or tax advice, nor as a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any security. You should always consult with a qualified financial advisor or tax professional before making investment decisions. The host and guest disclaim any liability for losses that may result from reliance on this discussion. Remember, all investing involves risk, and past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Welcome to Marketopolis, at the crossroads of Wall Street and the internet. In a feed-driven era powered by Reddit, Robinhood, YouTube, X, and many other platforms, retail investors drive the conversation online. Corporate access has been blown wide open, conversations move at the speed of social platforms, and CEOs, IROs, and comms teams are rewriting the investor relations playbook in real time. I'm Matt Giuano, CEO of Stakeholder Labs. Each episode, I talk with public company CEOs and top operators to uncover fresh strategies for communicating and competing in today's market. Whether you hold a single share or just love the story, you'll take away practical lessons for navigating modern public markets. This is Marketopolis. Let's get into it. Today, I sat down with George Arison from Grindr. Grindr is a $3.8, almost $4 billion market cap traded on the New York Stock Exchange. We covered a lot. Some of the themes that we really dove deep into were looking at Grindr as a mission-driven platform with massive business potentials. George reframed Grindr not just as a hookup app, but as a cultural force and community engine. He emphasized that Grindr is already deeply embedded in the lives of millions, supporting relationships, friendships, networking, and activism. And it's positioned as a profitable, culturally resonant public company and giving them the rare ability to drive for rights globally while generating real shareholder value. He also talked about being able to bring founder energy into a public company setting. George brings the founder level urgency and ownership to Grindr with his unique background, experience, and alignment with the company, despite not being the original founder. He's unapologetically hands-on with strategy, storytelling, product direction, even personally writing the shareholder letter. He frames the public markets not as a burden, but as a stage to reset brand narratives and unlock long-term impact. He also talks about AI as a growth engine and differentiator. Grindr is betting heavily on AI to reshape user experience and increase monetization, from matchmaking to chat summarization, A-list, and long-term plans for personalization and discovery across geographies. George sees AI as a way to break geographic limits and build smarter networks and deliver outsized value. Hi, George. Welcome to Marketopolis. We're really excited to have you here today. Thanks for joining us. We'd love to kick off. Just give us a little background on yourself and the company that you lead.
Thank you for having me. Excited to speak to you. I have a kind of thing I tell all my teams, like every Grindr user in the United States should be a Grindr shareholder, given that they spend an hour on the product a day, like kind of investing yourself basically. So it's a great conversation to have. I'm originally from Georgia, the country. I moved to the U.S. when I was 14 to go to high school. I was one of the first kids in the Soviet Union allowed to leave the Soviet Union to go abroad. I probably was the first kid allowed to go on my own that the government didn't pick to send abroad. Obviously, super fortunate that happened, and have lived in the U.S. basically ever since then, either as a student or as a worker. Spent years getting my green card, and then all the time to become a citizen. I didn't become a citizen until 2019, and so it took a really long time. So I have like intimate familiarity with the U.S. immigration laws. I'm very passionate about America, and I believe that the founders created something that's utterly incredible and irreplicable. And so in college, I studied politics. I always thought I was going to do politics, but I have this very kind of deep view that you need to first earn and provide for your family before you go serve. And so got into business kind of from that standpoint. Really didn't know anything about tech, but had a pretty amazing mentor in DC where I used to live, who was a very prominent and very, very successful entrepreneur in the DC area, but also just in general in the world of tech. And so through him, started to like learn about technology. And in 2006, we started a company called Taxi Magic, which was one of the earliest mobile tech companies, like way before the iPhone even existed, in terms of people actually being able to do something. Like we put apps on Blackberries when it was like literally us as an app, and I think Google Maps was an app. Like that was kind of the world we were in. And that company actually is still around. If you get into a New York City cab, you'll see a company called Curb, and Curb is the new name for Taxi Magic, for what we created back then. Then my green card was denied a couple times while I was at Taxi Magic because I owned too much stock in the company, and the labor department was worried that it was not a real company. I'm like, well, we've raised like tens of millions of dollars of funding and like have lots of users, so I don't know, but like it is what it was. And so the only way to for me to stay in the country was to go get a job at a big company and reapply for my green card. And so I left and moved to the Bay Area and joined Google kind of at the time, and knew that I was going to want to start another company. And in 2013, create a company called Shift, which is a marketplace for buying and selling cars. Long story there, and happy to talk through that. Built another company along the way in 2019 called Pulsar, which was an AI company for automotive as well. That company is still around also still. Now it's part of a bigger software for automotive called Impel, doing extremely well, like creating some of the most innovative AI in business even now. And kind of that's my story for getting me to the point where people approached me about Grindr. I knew that at some point I needed to transition from Shift. Like I was just exhausted and really, really tired. I had promised my husband that would actually be in 2020, but COVID happened. We went public, and like there was a lot of things that made it impossible. And kind of the founder view of like I gotta be here. By 2020. My husband's like, okay, like this has gone on for much longer than we agreed that it would go on for. And so we went out to look for my successor. We recruited a president who was going to, with the expectation that he would take over for me. And after that happened, one of the recruiters that was helping me in that search reached out and said, hey, there's like this a really unique company that is in need of a CEO, and you are like made in a lab for that job, and you said you really should talk to them, and she's like, even if you don't take the CEO job, like they'll need board members, and again, you're made in a lab to be a board member for this company, and so after a lot of prodding, I took a call and. As I learned more about it, because initially I was like, no, I'm not talking to Grindr, but like push, and they kind of convinced me to do the conversations. And the more I learned and kind of peeled the onion and was open, I'm like, this is truly like a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I know people often use that term, but like my life's been a pretty fortunate life, storybook story of like where I was born, where I'm now, and what I've been able to do. I ended up, also being married by then and had children, which, in my lifetime was not possible and was possible for a gay person. So I had this like really incredible life. And so for me to be saying like this was truly a lifetime opportunity was something very special. And the reason it was like, here's a real business with incredible profitability, a product that people love, but hasn't innovated almost at all. But you can kind of fund the innovation through these incredible profits that you're making. And it's going to be a public company. And it serves a user base that I know intimately, right? Because I'm part of it. And there are very few executives, in tech at my level who are part of the user base. And so all those things didn't seem very, very special. And that's kind of how I settled to join Grindr. For those people who don't know, Grindr has a very high brand recognition. We are a largest network of gay and bi men in the world. And the product started out as a hookup product, but over time grew into being lots of other things as well. And people are now on Grindr for relationships, for networking, for friendships, for just chatting. About 35% of all gay relationships in the United States that exist right now started on Grindr. It's a pretty incredible thing when you think about it, and just the impact that you have on people's lives in a really positive way. And so, the company had been founded by its founder, Joe Simkai, who did a really incredible job. He funded the whole thing himself, never took any venture capital. Grindr was profitable basically from day one. And he then sold the company to a Chinese ownership. CFIUS and the U.S. government basically said that can't happen. And so they forced Kunlun, the Chinese owner, to unwind that transaction by selling the business. And the people who bought the business, the three kind of individuals who led that transaction to rescue Grindr from Chinese ownership, really saved the company. Because the product was continuing to grow, but there was so little investment being done into the product and into the business that eventually there was going to be a disconnect between user growth and what was happening with the product. And then, it was a leveraged buyout, and so there was a lot of debt involved. And that to refinance the debt, the company had to go public. And so we went public pretty quickly in 2022. We did it through a SPAC, and I had done a SPAC transaction, so it was another reason why I made a lot of sense as a CEO.
How'd you feel about that, George? Going public again, you had already lived through that journey as a public company CEO. Talking to a lot of CEOs, they tell me it's not an easy role. You're effectively doing two jobs at the same time. You have to navigate the public markets, but you're also running the company. Having lived through that at Shift, how do you think about that when you signed up to be the CEO of Grindr?
And when you're signing up to frankly do it probably a little too early, right? Like it's the circumstances that are forcing you to do it versus what would make sense if you just were painting a story. I actually think for Grindr, I actually really like being a public CEO. Like most founders are very squeamish about it. I don't have that problem at all. Now, we all have different skills, right? Like I'm a pretty outgoing, very extroverted person. My superpowers are around telling the story, telling the vision, describing the mission, putting a strategy behind those things, and hiring the right people around me to then execute on that. I am actually pretty deep in the weeds on what we do, but I also defer to people to do the execution. That's my founder mode style. I'm not there, writing code and in the background. So for a person like me, being public is less stressful than for a lot of people who are founders. But I don't mind being a public CEO. I think it actually has a lot of advantages. Secondly, for a company like Grindr, there's added advantages, I think, of being public, which was that there was a lot of historical kind of brand debt that the company had accumulated because Grindr in the headlines leads to massive amount of clicks on that news story. And so any sneezing that Grindr would do or would happen, even whether it was real or not real, would result in a lot of headlines. And so people have these assumptions about us. And so being public, every quarter we get to get up there and describe our business, talk about actually how amazing of a business it is, talk about how an amazing of a job you're doing on behalf of your users and how you're impacting their lives, talk about your privacy policies and how they impact people, because we're a very privacy first business. And so telling that story allows you to have an opportunity to really address all this historical debt that had accumulated and gives you a platform kind of to do that. And so for us, that's actually very, very valuable and very helpful. And then lastly, Grindr is a business. No one's going to accuse George of being not a capitalist. I'm about as capitalist as they come. I don't know if I'm quite Elon Musk, but that's the level of I tend to think of my capitalism. Yeah. And I own another system. I'm all in. But Grindr does have a mission behind it. And by the way, us being a successful business helps us make that mission be even more true. And the way I think about it is this, the gay rights movement was probably the most successful civil rights movement in world history in terms of accomplishing the goals that it set out to do in a very short amount of time, way shorter than I think people thought was possible. And a big reason that was possible was obviously there were a lot of activists who pushed for that, but also because during that same time period, a lot of gay people came into people's consciousness as openly gay people who excelled at their chosen professions, and just happen to be gay, right? Like whether it's Martina Navratilova as like, what at that point the best and still one of the very best tennis players in human history, to like, but I happen to be gay and I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm gay. That's how I am, right? Or, Tim Cook as like, I'm an amazing executive and a business person, but I happen to be gay. And so there was, I think, a huge advantage that we had along the way, kind of in the civil rights fight, in that happening in the world. And Grindr now is positioned to be the first business in the same way, right? Like by being this amazing business that serves gay and bi people primarily, and showing how amazing of a business you can build with this user base, we can continue pushing the world to appreciate what gay people can do and that we are no different than everybody else and actually make really massive contributions to the world. And yes, we're in a much better place in the United States than almost anywhere else in the world. Like this is the place to be if you're gay. Now, yeah, there are a couple other countries too, but like in general. But in most of the world, that's actually not the case. In 60 countries around the world, it's illegal to be gay. It's only legal to get married in like up to 40 countries, not even 40 to be precise. And so there's still a lot of work to do around the world to create both tolerance and legal acceptance and legal equal rights for people. And so Grindr being this like really successful business gives you a platform to push for all those things. And the more successful you as a business, the more of a platform you have, right? One way I talk to the team about it is like, we're a close to $5 billion company now, and we get a lot of like I can go to the Hill and I will meet with senators and they'll listen to what I have to say. Great. But imagine if we were a $25 billion company, like how much impact would we have on the world that way? And so, because with financial success comes power. And so that, I think, part is also like very exciting around what we do and why being public makes a ton of sense as well.
I love how you frame that brand story and how you guys position yourselves. Obviously, Grindr has incredible cultural relevance, and we're seeing that across the board, online, offline, in politics and in culture. I'm curious, you touched on this a little bit already, but how do you translate this to a financial story and really weave the two together? Do you guys have a philosophy on your team with comms and investor relations around how you position and tell that story to the market and how you're weaving a little bit of both into that narrative?
Yeah, I mean, it is very much that. Like both stories are told kind of concurrently and at once. I don't view as like, hey, this is IR and this is, PR. Like, first of all, our head of marketing oversees comms, and most of the marketing we do is brand focused. We're not out there like looking for users to sign up through, direct advertising. Like Grindr doesn't need that. But telling our brand story and getting people to understand all the different things that happen on Grindr is a big part of our effort in branding. He also oversees comms because it's all totally interconnected. And he's like deeply involved in everything we do on the IR front, because the shareholder letter that we publish is like part of that, right? And so I've always had this view that having like a really robust, very transparent shareholder letter every quarter is really helpful for a public company. I've always liked the companies that do that, and rather than just like issue a press release that like is impossible to digest and gather information from. So we put a lot of effort into our shareholder letter. Like last night between 9:30 and 12:30, I was like literally writing the shareholder, and I do a lot of the writing myself. And obviously the team isn't really involved as well. And so we have a very kind of transparent process on that, trying to share as much information as we can. Now, we are public and there's some limitations on that. And it is very intertwined in what we do in our corporate comms efforts and what we do in our more consumer brand kind of communication efforts, and in what we do in branding. So that's kind of our general approach. I try to be out there as much as I can in telling that story. I think it really helps the business. And frankly, I also think it helps the users, right? Like we hired a person to run government affairs for us, who's a really great hire. And people will go, well, what issues does Grindr have with the government? I'm like, well, actually, our issues are pretty minor, like as Grindr, the business. Yes, there are some things we could work on, but they're not like, oh my God, if we don't have like a stellar government affairs function, we won't be able to be successful, right? But our users have issues with the government that are pretty extensive. And so one of the things that Joe has been spending most of his time on is actually HIV funding. Like, how do we make sure that we preserve all the HIV funding that happens through the U.S. government, both internally and externally. And PEPFAR has been a really big part of the story. And like I was in DC in the spring talking to senators and spent a lot of time with Senator Collins and Senator Baldwin and others, like making the case that, hey, we got to preserve this funding. So this week, the Senate voted on their rescission package, but they took out PEPFAR cuts, which like, I don't want to take credit for it. We did that, but like we were part of many people to push to make that happen. That's really, really important because like it really dramatically impacts our users' lives. And so that's kind of how we approach that. But that's also part of our brand story, right? Like that the government is a stakeholder for a business, and them understanding that we really care about this issue and we really care about our users and how they are faced with it. I think very much interrelates to the brand story that we tell, and I think has an impact on how our investors view us as well.
100%. We're seeing more and more public companies using earnings calls and investor days to double, triple, even quadruple dip. And in a financialized world, you don't have the luxury of having just this lane for finance and just this lane for comms. It all comes together. Kind of around that, when you think about it through the financial lens, what are the metrics you're tracking? Are you looking at trading volume and stock price? And I've always been curious, for a public company CEO, are you getting that via email as a briefing on everything? Are you looking at some custom dashboard, or are you just pulling out your brokerage account and seeing how your stock's performing?
I would be lying if I said I don't look at the share price. Like if you look at my phone, like, there's like Dow, Grindr, are there as the first things that pop up. So I do look at it. Even though I ask my team, like, not look at the share price because stock's going to go up and down. Doesn't matter. Actually, what matters is the long term. So from the financial metrics, actually, what I most care about is what's happening in the business, right? Like ultimately, if we deliver amazing results, which we strive to do, and we perform better and better and better all the time, the stock market will take care of itself and the share price will take care of itself as well. Like that's just the general kind of rule. That's kind of, and I can talk about how I manage the business and kind of what matters to Grindr from like the financial perspective. But from the stock market point of view, we are a newly public company. We went through a SPAC process. We had warrants. We now dealt with those warrants, and those have been removed from the equation as well. But there was like a lot of work to do around that. Then we need to gain analysts. We have analyst coverage now, which is good, but there's more to be had. And we still have a few very large shareholders in the company who are very, very big believers. And frankly, one of them, when it came to accessing his warrants, he actually like cash exercised all of his warrants and put $170 million more into the company, even though he's the largest shareholder. So like, talk about like believer, like, yeah, very much a believer. So these guys are very strong believers, which is awesome, and have a very high level of confidence that we can do a lot of awesome things. But that comes with the fact that, like, our trading volume used to be a lot lower. Now it's actually really good and in a pretty good place. But we were looking at that as well. But no, I get the email that NYSE sends out about like what happened on that day. But that's the only thing I really get from like the stock market point of view. I don't really spend that much time thinking about like, okay, doing X or Y, how will the share price kind of respond to that? I need to do what's right for the business. And for me, the big things are like drive revenue growth, drive profitability, obviously, like as much as possible, while at the same time ensuring that the users have the very best possible experience that they can have in the app, because that's the secret sauce, right? Like Grindr works because our users really care about the product and get a lot out of it, and we need to continue making sure that they get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned earlier that you expect that a lot of Grindr users might also be Grindr shareholders.
I hope they are. They should be. I don't know if actually they are. We've not really had a big retail kind of focus yet in the work that we've done. Like, I don't have a big Twitter presence at all, or an X presence at all. I need to build one out because that's, I think, a really big way in which you communicate with the retail community. That's something we just haven't had a chance to like focus on yet, but it's kind of on the come. But in my view, like, if knowing how much time a Grindr user spends on Grindr, we are like a really huge part of their lives, like on a daily basis. And so my general argument to them is like, just invest in yourself, right? Like in effect, meaning investing in you, the time that you spend on the app, because given how important it is to you, we know it's as important to everybody else who's on the app. Like, that's a pretty strong argument that the company will do well and will do, better and better over time.
Yeah, it's a little bit of Warren Buffett, invest in what you know, kind of as an aside. But how did you discover Grindr for the first time?
I was living in DC. This is 2009. I was working on Taxi Magic. Taxi Magic was primarily on BlackBerry. We did have an iPhone product, but the primary user base was on BlackBerry. And so I was using a BlackBerry because that's where I wanted to use the app. And so I did not know about Grindr from like my own experience because, I'm on BlackBerry. But I had a friend who had an iPhone. This is the very early days of the iPhone, so not everyone has an iPhone. And and we're at a bar called Halo in DC. And Halo was awesome because it was the first bar, the gay bar in DC to ban smoking. And so I was like very, very devoted to that bar because like I don't like smoking. And so we're sitting there and he's like, man, I gotta show this new app I discovered. And he pulls out and his phone had like fallen and was like a little broken. Like remember the early days of the iPhone and like I think the screen was smashed. And he opens up Grindr and I'm like, oh my God, like who are all these people that are literally right next to us? Because like all these other guys were on Grindr in the bar.
It's almost a digital layer on top of the bar.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, I got to go get an iPhone because like I can't not have this basically. I mean, this is like, I'm still young at this point and single. And so that's how I discovered Grindr. And I did go out and get an iPhone. And I did have one VC who, knew Joel Simkai, the founder of Grindr, really well back in the day. And he's like, I think there was like some estimate at one point that like in the first 2 to 3 years of Grindr, like it was the responsible for about 500,000 iPhone sales, which in no way would surprise me because like kind of I'm thinking I was the only one who had this reaction. Like I got to go get an iPhone given this product. And so that's that's how I learned about Grindr. And then a year later, I moved from DC to the Bay Area for the reasons we discussed. And I had a lot of friends in the Bay Area. But a lot of my college friends were here, but I didn't have like a gay network in the Bay Area because I had, come out in DC and had built a very, very deep set of friends in Washington. And so some of the first people I met in the Bay Area who were gay, I met on Grindr. And there was never anything sexual with them. It was like literally like we knew from the beginning there was going to be not sexual compatibility, but we find each other interesting. We are both in tech, etc. Like, let's go get a drink or get lunch or whatever. And they became my close friends. And some of them I still like. I'm really close friends with today. So I didn't need to be convinced that hey, Grindr does more than just a hookup because I'm like, yeah, I know Grindr does hookups. I've done a lot of those, and I also know that Grindr does these other things because I have relationships that have resulted from Grindr that are not sexual. It's also very common in gay life where you hook up and then you decide you're not going to hook up anymore, but you're going to become close friends. Straight world, that's not quite as common, but for us it is. And so there's also friendships that develop from Grindr that actually start in a hookup and then result in a friendship, or vice versa. Where like a bunch of hookups happen, and then like, oh, maybe we should go on a date, and then they start kind of dating in a relationship, right? So it's a very kind of intertwined world, and the product enables a lot of that. And a core thesis of what we're doing as a product on a go-forward basis, actually, that works really well right now in these like geographically constrained areas. Like I went from DC to San Francisco, and Grindr did this for me in the Bay Area. But because we're so, the Grindr's magic is like everyone around you, they win an immediacy, like who is with you. But the thing that AI can now help us do is actually expand the geographic footprint to make it be much broader. Because the geographic constraint is literally only around like, okay, how many people can I be looking at any given time, right? But with AI, we can create sets of profile lists for you that are very, very targeted to what are your interests and what you are like and what they are like and where there's compatibility that are global. And for gay people, because there are only like so many gay people in the world, right? Like whatever percentage you want to assume, it's not a very, very large number of the population. And so we can break down these geographic barriers and you can have a much broader set of people you're engaging with. And so we can create a community for you, in a geographically diverse way that is really targeted to what your interests are. That was previously impossible to do because we didn't have the data or the ability to kind of match you that well because we were using like, very few criteria for matching and any product was. But now with Gen AI, we can take the 130 billion chats that Grindr users produced last year, which is like a remarkable number because it's more chats per day per user than on WhatsApp, and understand users a lot better and a lot more intimately in terms of what they really want, obviously only with user permission, and then use that data to create much better matches and lists of people that they should be talking to. Kind of in the product itself, we call that Discover. And so I think we can solve a really big problem in gay life, which is lack of density, right? In New York, you have density. In Bay Area, you sort of have density. In DC, you have density. Chicago, you have density. But in Des Moines, Iowa, you don't have density because it's like really, really small. But there are a lot of gay people who live in Des Moines, Iowa, and a lot of the gay people who live in a lot of other more rural communities around the world. And so we can create communities for them online in a very digital way. And that's why we are saying Grindr is the gayborhood on your phone, right? Because for kind of big cities where there's a gayborhood, that's your community in a geographic sense, but most places they don't exist. And we kind of function as that for them.
I love that you guys kind of take the social graph, but you're able to use that to then create an interest graph and then come back to the social graph. It's almost a circle. And you take elements from a network like Instagram where there's personal relationships, but then it's almost more like a Reddit where you're able to combine that with interest. People are using their first name and it's powerful.
And the other piece here is like, our users travel a lot. It's like actually really remarkable. Of our weekly active users, 25% are not in the geography that they normally live in any given week. It like is completely mind-boggling, frankly. Now, some of this is because I actually think we are used more. A cohort of Grindr users uses us more when they are traveling versus when they're not traveling. Partly because they have a very active life, in their community, but don't when they're traveling, and so they kind of the supplements. But that's not the only thing. I just think gay people also travel a lot more. It also logically makes sense because, gay people don't have children. They have a higher income than average. And a gay household in the U.S. earns 2x what a straight household in the U.S. earns on average. Yeah. And, 2x rates of JDs, PhDs, MDs of the population. And so they have disposable income as a result, and they use it to travel. They also, a lot of them are overachievers and their jobs require them to travel, et cetera. And so travel is a really big part of the product, and that's another area where like this unique world of data and Gen AI models now creates really unique opportunities for us in exactly what you were describing.
Have some questions directly from social media. What a lot of people call out, and I'll read a post from StockTwits. It's actually from a person named Big Bear, or at least that's their username, but they're looking at the difference between Grindr and Bumble. So a lot of what we found on social was comparing you guys to stocks like Bumble or Match. And most of the conversation was distinguishing Grindr as a completely different company. It's not only a dating app. So I'd love to get your take on how you see yourselves compared to other dating app companies, but also beyond that, how is Grindr different?
Yeah. So I think of it as like phases almost of our evolution of our how people understand us. And when I say people, like investors understand us. When I was first talking to the Grindr team about potentially joining, I actually joined the board first. It was a great way for me to get to know them and for them to get to know me. And we would look at kind of the plan for the IR story as we were going public through the SPAC. And, it was all around Bumble and Match were kind of like the comps, right? Because in the investor's mind, that was the most logical comp, like dating product. And what I said early on then was like, if that's fine if we have to do that, but our goal in IR over the next 36, 48 months should be we got to get people to start thinking about Grindr more like a social network than just a dating product. We might be a dating product in a sense in terms of how we monetize, but we're a social network in how people use us. And I think what I'm really happy about is that actually much sooner than we thought we got to that. Like now when you talk to Grindr investors, like public investors who are in our stock, who might be on a quarterly basis, or we go to conferences, or analysts, like none of them think of Grindr as like a dating product. They think of Grindr as a social network that happens to monetize the dating use case a lot, but it is so much more to it. So that's been really successful, and we did it, I think, like a year or two earlier than I thought would happen. So that's really great. Like Pinterest or Facebook, Instagram out of the better analogs actually to us, and I think the multiple on the valuation kind of has shown that. Now, the next step of our, I think, evolution is to get people to think of Grindr in two more ways. One is that actually we have an opportunity to monetize with our users in ways not just what we're doing today, but in many other ways. So we are really focused on not just driving Grindr core to monetize better, which obviously we want to do and we've done really well, but to build new businesses within our company that are targeting our user base and are using Grindr as a distribution engine, but that are capturing more of their wallet, right? So the first one we are starting is called Woodwork, which is a telemedicine platform that we're creating. Its first kind of product is ED medications. We know that a lot of Grindr users buy ED medications, and so it made sense to start with that. But they buy them today from what a lot of world would classify as like heteronormative kind of brands. And hey, like you can actually buy from a gay brand that created this product for gay people. And so that's kind of the story there. Now, this is a startup, like it's literally run as a startup with now a 4-person team. It was a 2-person team when they launched. We've now grown to 4, and like literally metrics for them are very much startup. So I don't report their numbers, and I've asked all our investors like not ask me questions about it for many quarters. But the idea is this can actually become a standalone growth driver for Grindr over the long term. And there's a whole slew of other similar expansion opportunities that we're focused on that are things we're working on. There's one in travel, there's one in local discovery, there's one in luxury lifestyle, and there's stuff beyond that we'll do longer term. And obviously, we start with ED for Woodwork, but like there's many other medications that we can add to that, and other healthcare services that can be added to that platform. So that's kind of one thing that we need to build credibility around, and people to start giving us credit that yes, this is actually possible. Grindr can capture more of the wallet of its users beyond the kind of Grindr core. And then the second thing is that we are really transforming the business to be an AI native company, both in how we work and what the product offers inside the product. I had built an AI company in 2018, 2020. So I knew that this was going to be a huge opportunity because data was here. So we said focus on Lily the minute I showed up. Like, I think my first executive team meeting, I said, okay, I like our plans here and here and here, but like somehow we are lacking an AI plan, and AI plan should be like 25% of what we think about, like all the time. That changed very quickly. We've been very focused on AI from that time onward, before kind of ChatGPT came out. And now we're starting to see the results of that in the product. So we launched our first AI native product within Grindr called A-List. It takes all these conversations that people have had, for months and months and months that get lost in the inbox, and you forget about all these great connections that you had, and creates a short list, aka an A-list of the best conversations that you've been having. And within that, you get a summary of these chats, and these are like really powerful summaries. I mean, they're also like hilarious in some respects, but people like really love them, and the feedback's been like really like, oh, this is magical, etc. And then collects all the photos into a folder, so you have all the photos that has been sent to each other are like easily available, and then gives you like a sense of like, okay, we Grindr believe this guy's a contender, and this guy you already met with, this one's like a good friend opportunity, and so forth. And there's a lot more we can do with this. Like, Grindr has always had a favorites list where you create your own favorites, but eventually we'll integrate A-list and favorites into one user experience that's a lot better. And maybe recommend people using that, because right now it's about conversation that you had with people, but over time, all this analytics that's happening on this data can actually drive recommendations, right? Saying, hey, like, based on everything we know about Matt's the right person to be talking to George. Let's kind of tell them that they should talk. So exactly, yeah, exactly. And we're doing this all on our own. Like, it's we're not building our own foundational models. That wouldn't make sense, but we are retraining the models in some ways, and we're building. Yeah, and we're building a lot of architecture layer to like make it really easy for us to do this over time. We're multi-model now. We're going to be multi-hosted eventually, because some models are available in certain hosts and not others. So like right now we're on Amazon, but we want to be able to expand and be able to switch between Amazon, Google, Azure, etc. So there's a lot of like technical work that's going on the team to facilitate this. And yes, we're not an AI native company because we didn't start that way, but what I want Grindr to be in 2 years is to be an AI native company. And that's the other area where I think we need to get investors to appreciate that and give us credit for that, because obviously that's a very different value than what we are today.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. There's a post actually from Reddit where someone is looking at you guys through that lens, and then they're looking at short-term increases in ARPU versus long-term. I guess on your end, how do you guys think about that affecting price strategy and also short-term versus long-term lens? Sounds like there could be 10x, 100x opportunity on the user experience, but how do you balance that with short-term user growth?
Yeah, so we said in our investor day, which was a year ago, feels like it was 3 years ago, but it was only a year ago, that we would aim to be growing kind of somewhere between 22.5 and 27.5% a year, I think, was kind of the rough sense that we gave folks. But we didn't say that number. It's like if you calculate it based on the end state of how much revenue we thought we'd have, 3 years out, that's kind of what you'd roughly get to. That's like the baseline of kind of what we're going to do. Now, we are realistically running ahead of that because if you just take our run rate in Q1, we are ahead of where we said we'd be, 3 years out, which is good. That's kind of always how I tend to think of things, like promise very good results and then deliver even better, right? That's how you get investors to believe in you. That's kind of our, and we really are not focused on ARPU in that sense. So it's like ARPU is an output. What our goal is to drive more people to become payers, or more people to be paying more money. Doesn't really matter which way we do it. That driving revenue up. Like that's kind of the revenue up is the ultimate goal. There's different ways you could get there. So that's one part of the equation. But if we do all the things we're saying we're going to do, inevitably ARPU would need to go up with one caveat, which is that like right now we are still more heavy in paying customers in the Western world, or what would be classified as the Western world, like the United States, English-speaking countries, Europe, but Grindr has a lot of users abroad. Now, a lot of those users do pay, but they pay a lot less on a per month basis than the people who are in more developed countries do. And so, depending on how our conversions grow in some of these other countries like India and Brazil and Philippines, etc., that could be quote unquote a drag on ARPU but that's not a bad thing because we want them to be payers as well, right? So, but otherwise, for all the new initiatives that we're doing, medium and long term, whether it's totally new products like Woodwork or innovation inside the core Grindr app like AI features, you would expect ARPU to over time go up. One of the things that I kind of came to realize with AJ, our chief product officer, as we spend a lot of time talking through this, is that the value we're creating for users with some of the AI features is just so much more than what we are charging right now. Like it's not, hey, we are charging $40, $39.99 for our unlimited tier, and that means we add $5 to it. Like it's an exponentially different value. And so one of the things we need to test and understand is like, is there a segment of Grindr users that is really valuing this AI innovation and is willing to pay for that? Like, I don't have an answer to that yet, but that's the thing we need to test. And that could create different segmentation of our pricing that we have not done so far. We'll see kind of how that goes, but that's one of the tests that we're going to be thinking about in the coming quarters. I've talked about this kind of publicly, so it's not anything like new. It's also pretty obvious. I think Duolingo is a really good comp for Grindr, and they're running like 6 to 12 months ahead of us in terms of some of the things that they're launching. And so, they had a very successful AI tier launch, and so I think there's a lot to be learned, from that. So that's one of the things that we're thinking about more kind of near term, like in the next couple of years. Like, how do we ensure that the value that users are getting is properly, paid for, basically, in the product?
I love that, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that's what a lot of companies are grappling with right now is they want to create more value, and then the assumption is that they can figure out the pricing later. We've got 3 last quick questions for you, George. So someone at Reddit talked a little bit about that bifurcation of the dating world from a macro sense and really called out that they're seeing that the elite dating apps are thriving, and they put Grindr in that category versus some of the more mass market long tail apps that might be struggling a little bit. So I'd love to get your take on, just from a macro lens with the industry, what's happening with the dating apps today.
I think that's probably true. And I think network effect is a really important piece. And so the more users bigger products gain, it's much harder for the niche products to be successful because those users are using the bigger companies and you can offer them the niche features inside the bigger product. So that thesis makes sense to me broadly. That sense, like in the gay community, actually, there is a niche product opportunity, and I don't want to dispute that at all. And there's some really successful niche products within the gay ecosystem that are doing very, very well. And we don't really view them as competitors, honestly, because they're doing their thing, we're doing our thing, and that's okay. But they're still very successful as businesses. But I think the real challenge that the dating ecosystem, and by that I literally mean like Match and Bumble, have had is that there's been very little investment in the product. So the way I tend to think of it is like, they had like this kind of cohort of this is their product space. And instead of growing the product surface area, they just monetized more and more of the product area that they had. And that's a challenge. And that's exactly what we didn't want to do. When I started here, I'm like, no, we got to grow the space to be a lot more surface area in the product and then monetize. Now, we were fortunate because we have the time to do that because we can drive monetization and get, more revenue in the business while we build all those things. And so that's been fortunate as an opportunity for us. And frankly, having investors who are very long-term focused also helps with that because they're like, no, I'm not just focused on 2023, 2024, 2025. I'm focused on like, where are we in 2030? So that's been, and the board is very supportive of that strategy as well. So that's been really good, but that's been our approach. I've not really seen that from other, dating products. That is very much, I think, a more founder mentality than a hired executive mentality in terms of how you approach it. And so I did not found Grindr, but like how I think about it is like no different than my own company. Like I frankly told people when they were interviewing me, I'm like, if you guys want like a CEO whom the board tells what to do and like he only does that, like great, that's not me. Like I'm used to really strategically directing what I'm doing and that comes with good and the bad. And like, are you comfortable with that? And everyone's like, yes, that's exactly what we want. We want you to think like an owner. And that's what I tell my team. Like, I want every single person thinking like an owner because they are, right? Like that everyone has stock in Grindr who works here. So that's the piece I think that differs between what we are doing and what other products are doing.
I love that. In the ethos of the founder mentality, it does sound like you're carrying that flag forward and you maintain the ethos and how you build the company, and kind of playing off the back of that. You mentioned employees are also shareholders. You had mentioned that you think there also might be users who are shareholders. If you had the opportunity to send a message to all the retail investors, so individual investors who bought into Grindr after you guys went public, what would be that message? What would you want to tell them?
I think the message would be A, thank you for your support. B, there's still a lot of growth to be had here. Like I think we've done very well in execution over the last 3 years. Like I'm very proud of what the company's done and really stepped up. I mean, by the way, we only have 155 or something people who work here. So we are also a very lean business. And I like it that way because leaner teams, smaller teams are way more effective, move way faster. And yes, we need to hire more. Like I'm not disputing that. We need more people and we're actively hiring a lot more people. But, it so happened that we're doing more than 2 million in revenue per head after some changes that we made on the team. And I'm like, oh, that's a really great metric. I was not planning on tracking that metric, but now I'm really tracking that metric. I think the assumption is we're going to keep doing that. There's a lot more growth opportunity ahead. And so I think people shareholder Grindr ones who are not thinking about Grindr from like what happens quarter over quarter, but what happens year over year and what happens over a 3, 4, 5, 6 year period. Like I'm in here for the long haul. My team's here for the long haul. Our large shareholders are here for the long haul. And that's the mentality that we have. Like we want to drive results here over the long term. And they're very combined. Like the results is not just, hey, have good financials. It's have good financials in a sustainable way which means that you create a lot of value for users, keep users very happy, and be very user-centric and focused, because that's what makes it all work. And then financial results kind of come out of that. And that's the mentality I take in building products in general. And I think that works. And that's the approach we're going to take on a go-forward basis.
I love it. Thank you, George. I learned a lot about you, the company, and the stock. I think our listeners as well will find this incredibly valuable.
Great conversation. Really enjoyed it. And you asked different questions than the ones most investors ask, which is good because, the normal stuff I answer a lot on investor calls. So that was really helpful.
Thanks for tuning in to Marketopolis, powered by Stakeholder Labs. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss upcoming conversations with leaders shaping modern investor relations.